Why am I in Turkey? Because Turkey has one of the most attractive programs out there for foreign real estate investors. It's essentially buy $400,000 of real estate anywhere in Turkey, and they will give you citizenship within a year. So just by shifting $400,000 to Turkish real estate for 3 to 5 years, you are making a generational move that your great-grandchildren will be like, oh wow, like we now have more opportunities to travel internationally, and we have access to different types of bank accounts and to financial products and to other markets, etc. There are opportunities like this in international real estate, which I personally find absolutely fascinating.
Welcome to the On the Rise podcast, where we talk about time freedom, passive investing through real estate, finance, and mindset. Let's dive in. Quick disclaimer as always, I am not a CPA, I am not an attorney or a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. I am not telling you or anyone else what to do. The views and opinions expressed in these podcasts are provided for education and informational purposes only and are not necessarily the views of my employer. All right, welcome back on the Rise podcast listeners. Thank you again for jumping into yet another episode. I've got another amazing guest, as I do always. I've got Ladislas Maurice. Ladislas, welcome to the show.
Thank you. How are you, Jeremy?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Thanks. Appreciate it. So Ladislas is really I guess we're going to call him the wandering investor. He basically lives, it sounds like, all over the world. Currently, as we're speaking right now, he's joining the podcast episode from Turkey. So that's kind of a cool venture out there. We don't typically have too many international podcast guests, on our show. So we'd love for you just, before we kind of chop it up here a little bit, we'd love for you to let us know a little bit more about, your kind of background, your journey, what you're focused on today, et cetera.
Sure. So went to college in Canada, studied business there, then went to business and law school in Australia, and then did corporate for most of my 20s, well, all of my 20s. I started off with Nestlé, the big food company in Switzerland, and then was expatriated to Africa for 7 years. So I spent most of my 20s working in corporate in Africa. So first in South Africa and then in Ghana, where I was in charge of the milk business for Nestlé for a few West African countries. So that was fun. And at the age of 30, I decided that I didn't necessarily want to be the milk expert of West Africa. So I decided to start something else. But before looking for a new job, I went on a big road trip because my parents were retiring at the same time as I was leaving my job. So we took the car from Oman in the Middle East next to Dubai to Paris. So we drove all the way. We put the car on a ferry. We crossed all of Iran. We went into Armenia, into Georgia, crossed all of Turkey, went down to Greece, went up to Ukraine, and then went to Paris. And that journey was such an eye-opener because it was the first time that I had two things at the same time. Time, right? When you're young, you don't really have time. And money. I had time and money. And that's very rare. It's very rare to be in this situation in life. Have time, have money, and to be young and have energy to do things. So I saw some opportunities along the way in terms of real estate because we'd go into all these cities and I'd go look at real estate agencies and talk to lawyers, expats, meet locals. Like we're just slow traveling. And I just started doing real estate flips. And now it's been almost 10 years. And I travel around the world with a focus on emerging and frontier markets. And I just do real estate deals everywhere. And I started documenting the journey through a blog and then a YouTube channel. And now that's what I do with The Wandering Investor is I travel around the world full time looking at real estate opportunities and residencies as well, and how to acquire second citizenships.
That's great. Well, I appreciate that background. So, when you are evaluating, different emerging markets to go into or to invest into, or to maybe even encourage, other individuals, to seek a second residency in, what are some of the top, factors that you look at before deploying capital or before, encouraging, your investors to potentially, make a transition or a residential move to that country?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, look, when you start going into these countries, especially the frontier markets, there aren't that many investable asset classes. It's not like the US where there are literally millions of things you can invest in. If you go into if you go into Nicaragua or you go into Tajikistan or Uzbekistan or Malawi, um, there's not that much necessarily that you can invest in apart from real estate. Sometimes there are local stock exchanges. Sometimes the bond market can be interesting. Sometimes there could be some venture capital opportunities. So it's quite limited. So the first step is really trying to understand which countries are interesting. Once you've zeroed in on the countries that have interesting developments going on, then I go there, I spend some time, a few weeks, a few months, and then I ask myself, how do I play this market? And in some cases, there is no way to play the market, or there's no real attractive way to play the market, or there's a way that's a bit attractive but isn't worth the risk. So it really, really depends. And as for encouraging people to do that, that's really on an individual basis. Look, the reality is, first make your money back home before going around and buying international real estate. Look, the U.S. is still the one of the best places in the world to make money, though it has become harder in many respects. But still, for real estate, even though the market's not doing great right now, it still is a market that's much more liquid than the rest of the world. You have financing capabilities, etc. Once you start venturing overseas, you lose all of that. You get generally less liquidity and potentially zero access to financing. So if you're going to be going into international real estate as a North American or as a European, just understand that make your own money back home first. And then it's kind of like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. International real estate is just going up there a bit more. So it's about lifestyle. It's about diversification, right? If you want to diversify, not be all in a single jurisdiction, or if you want some other benefits like a residency or citizenship. I mean, you mentioned I'm in Turkey. Why am I in Turkey? Because Turkey has one of the most attractive programs out there for foreign real estate investors. And it's essentially buy $400,000 of real estate anywhere in Turkey, any real estate. And they will give you citizenship within a year. So just buy a few apartments here in different cities, be diversified. I mean, Istanbul is a city of 15 million people that has been around for millennia. It's the city with the best connected airline in the world, Turkish Airlines. Very dynamic. Real estate is pretty affordable in many cases. If you go on the secondary market, you're looking at less than like $200 per square foot for near prime real estate in a city of over 15 million people. And they'll give you citizenship for this to you, your spouse, and all your underage children. And then after 3 years, you can sell it, or after 5 years without paying local capital gains taxes. And then when your kids have kids, they can, as long as they register their children, even if they're not born in Turkey, at a Turkish consulate or embassy, the kids will be Turkish too. So just by shifting $400,000 to Turkish real estate for 3 to 5 years, you are making a generational move that your great grandchildren will be like, oh, wow, like thanks to great granddad, like we're Turkish and we now have more opportunities to travel internationally and we have access to different types of bank accounts and to financial products and to other markets, etc. So there are opportunities like this in international real estate, which I personally find absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, that's great, and it's great that you've taken action on that, as well. And thankful to also have reported. And I mentioned this to you earlier before the episode began, but my wife and I had the wonderful pleasure of visiting Kadashi, which I think is, well, I know is called ancient Ephesus. Whether that's Kadashi, the name of the city that we're in, or not, I can't quite remember. But I can tell you that the Turkish people are wonderful. The cuisine is great. It's a very safe, country to visit, as an international traveler. So really appreciate your perspective there. But I also know that I've been an international investor myself and have invested in a number of different international type real estate endeavors. Most recently, I deployed capital into a coffee plantation syndication business in the country of Colombia. So I know that oftentimes these types of developing countries, those types of investments, oftentimes have this excitement of high potential returns, but what a lot of times investors don't understand is they're paying a premium, for that level of risk, involved, given the unpredictability, in some developing economies. So, how do you kind of balance that, potential for high returns with the fact that some of these investments can be, more unpredictable or less stable than maybe a U.S. type of investment would be, just because of the fact that that investment is largely in an emerging or developing country.
Look, if buying real estate, generally speaking, is not particularly risky if you choose good lawyers. When you hear all these horror stories of Jonathan went to Mexico and bought land, but it turns out he didn't buy the land, he got scammed. Well, you find out that Jonathan went with his girlfriend's cousin it's just, if you use a serious law firm, you'll be fine. So I'll put it this way: international real estate is not particularly risky. Even in Venezuela, with all the crazy socialist stuff, Maduro didn't seize foreigners' real estate. So that's pretty low risk. Now, when you start going into coffee farms in Colombia, yeah, you're definitely going. It's definitely high risk. You're doing venture capital in Colombia. And guess what? Venture capital is risky in the U.S. It's even riskier in Colombia. So it's also very asset class dependent. But as long as you are aware of the risks that you're taking, that you really understand them, it's fine.
I'm Zach Haptonstall, CEO and co-founder of Rise 48 Equity. Our goal is to help you protect and grow your wealth by investing in large multifamily apartment buildings. We do all the work as far as sourcing these large apartment buildings from the brokers, doing all of the on-site management with our vertically integrated property management company, doing all the renovations with our vertically integrated construction company. We completely rebrand the exteriors. We will renovate the interiors to our full platinum level scope, which increases the value of the asset to get that profit margin for the investors. If you'd like to learn about how you can partner with us on these exciting opportunities, and go to our website and set up a call with our team.
I also kind of think about, what asset classes, from an international investing perspective. And I suppose those asset classes are going to be different, from country to country. But, based upon your kind of, experience, what are those asset classes that are currently offering, the best, combination of yield, growth, and long-term demographic tailwinds?
I mean, right now I'm looking at oil. I mean, you can buy not financial advice, all right, but you can buy these South American majors, oil companies. Everyone thinks oil is dead. These companies have great balance sheets. They have a ton of reserves, and they're still printing cash and paying out dividend yields of 10% a year. And you're just sitting for a change in the oil market to happen. Like everything else has become expensive. This is not. So that's just one relatively obvious way to play it.
That makes sense. Has there been any, investments that you've personally made, or you've maybe coached other investors in making, that didn't quite, go as planned? And, how are you helping to kind of mitigate, against international risks?
Cool. Well, one is always use a good law firm. That's one. That's like literally the number one thing. Just if you're going to remember anything here, just don't be cheap when it comes to getting a lawyer overseas. And don't go with your cousin's friend or whatever, go with lawyers that understand the issues that international investors face. Because if you go into Colombia, for example, as you would know, Jeremy, you can transfer your money directly into some random bank account and it's fine. And a lot of local lawyers will say, yeah, sure. You want to finance this coffee farm? Here, sign the contract, send the money to their account. Boom, you're good. And it's true. But you actually need to register your foreign investment with the Colombian central bank. And if you deal with just a local lawyer that doesn't understand this, the transaction will go through. But later, when you try to get your dividends or you try to cash out, the local bank will say, cool, can we see Jeremy's initial foreign investment declaration form? Well, Jeremy doesn't have one. Then you end up like drug dealers in Colombia trying to get money out, you end up paying a lot for crypto, or you just end up in a bad situation. So just use a good lawyer. And two, in terms of an example, I'll give you an example. I bought real estate in Ivory Coast in West Africa after the Civil War, because it just made sense from a macro point of view. It was a great play. But it was when I was still working in West Africa, and I just didn't have enough time to spend in the market to really analyze the market itself. Like, I understood that overall the country, yes, but in terms of where to buy my real estate, I got that wrong. So real estate in the meantime has gone through the roof because recovery, Civil War, Ivory Coast is doing very well economically, etc. My villas have not. So, and I was trying to objectively be too smart about it. And, I think I was trying to be too smart, maybe a bit too greedy. And I think the reality is, when you have a normal life and you go overseas for a few weeks to make an investment, just understand that it'll be hard to beat the local market. So don't add to the risk by going into, random tier 3 investments in a tier 3 jurisdiction. Just stick to tier 1, right? Sometimes don't overcomplicate and don't try to be smarter than other people, especially if you're tight on time.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I can see how that would help make the risk reward, profile smooth out a little bit better than, going into some, other higher risk, type, potentially higher reward, type investments as well. So, when I kind of think about, your situation where you kind of have the freedom, really to travel the world and, work with investors, on a global, basis. It makes me think about kind of, the three different things that come to mind when I think of the word freedom. I think of financial freedom. In your case, you have geographic freedom, and then you've got, personal freedom, whatever that personal side, means to you, which is really probably more time freedom than anything. So, after you've seen, so much of the world, what does freedom really mean to you?
Yeah, that's a very personal question, but I would say not having the government tell me how to live. And it's something that you Americans are actually quite lucky with, right? Even though tension is rising and it's not the way it used to be and this and that. You still have a level of personal freedom in the US that is very hard to find in other countries. But it is decreasing. But the way I've structured my life, by having multiple citizenships, by having multiple residencies, by having income from various places, by having banking all over, if I don't like a place, if I'm not feeling it, I can just go. If I want to raise my kids a certain way, and for whatever reason it's not acceptable in whatever jurisdiction, I can just leave. I'm very free. I'm very, very free. So it comes with complexity, right? My life is not free of complexity. The more you go international, the more complex your life becomes. As you would know with your coffee farm investment in Colombia, it was more paperwork and more complicated than just buying an ETF. But that's the price of diversification and freedom. It's adding, it comes at a cost.
Yeah, it makes sense. But you also have the luxury of giving yourself and giving, your family that opportunity to live, internationally and to see, other people and other cultures and, other places. It's one of the things that my wife and I are very thankful of. When we were in college, we had the opportunity to, really travel internationally to several Asian countries. When I was in my early tech, sales days, most of our annual President's Club, quota club trips were all in international places around the world. So really appreciated, that opportunity to be, flexible and be able to have, those experiences, which I hope to be able to also give to my own children. And it sounds to me like you're, also, living for that type of experience as well for your family.
Yeah, and it can be as simple as, giving birth abroad. So for all the, young people out there that are, starting families, I mean, that's what we did with my wife. We had the kid in Mexico. And just by having a kid in Mexico, the kid being born in Mexico, the child becomes Mexican from day one, on top of all the other citizenships the kid has. And then the parents and both sets of grandparents and any siblings under the age of 18 all get permanent residency for life in Mexico. So just by popping a baby in Mexico, which is in many cases a lot cheaper than potentially even going through your insurance in the US, and pleasant, you can be in Cancun and go swimming and all that. You have a plan B available for the whole family. And there are so many little things like that you can do.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I had no idea that was the case. My wife and I went through the adoption process and adopted 2 children from Wuhan, China. And so I'm fairly familiar, with some of those complexities and citizenships and so forth, just because of that, experience that we went through. But I had no idea that if you just happen to have a child in an international country, that the parents as well as the grandparents, become citizens, of that country as well.
Well, Jeremy, if you're looking to adopt a third, it also works for adoption. So you can adopt a Mexican and get PR out of it.
That's great. Well, that sounds good. Well, this has been a great conversation. I've really appreciated, the value that you brought. Are there any maybe parting words that you'd like to leave with our audience, or maybe let us know of 1 or 2 different ways that we can connect and engage with you offline?
Yeah, I think it's, we're entering strange times. I think everyone can feel it. And there are 2 risks here for people. Look, we're going to be living through very volatile times. We have, if the last 5 years are any indication of what the world will look like, like, I don't know what the world will look like in 5 years if we're going to have as much craziness as in the past 5 years. So there are 2 risks for people. One is not seeing or not wanting to admit that the world has changed and is changing fast, and not adapting and not being diversified enough. And 2, the other risk is overdoing it as well, is going into doomsday prep and being all negative and, missing out on life. So people just need to strike a balance. I think that, live like an optimist, but be prepared like a pessimist. I think those are the times that we're entering. And in terms of, following me, I have a blog, a newsletter, Notes from the Road on thewanderinginvestor.com. You can sign up there, and then you'll get updates as I travel around the world about, updates on international real estate, residency, citizenships. And I have a YouTube channel as well, The Wandering Investor, Instagram, X, Telegram, Facebook, LinkedIn, the whole deal.
That's great. Well, we'll put those links in the show notes for the episode. And really appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Of course. And listening audience, thank you again for joining another episode of the On the Rise podcast. We look forward to having you join us on the next episode.
Thank you for hanging out with us today and for listening to the On the Rise podcast. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on this show should be considered financial advice. Before making any financial decisions, please consult with a professional. This show is copyrighted by the On the Rise podcast. Written permissions must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.